Here's what's coming up on The World Today. Ukraine's separatists announced plan to evacuate civilians to Russia. The United States says Russia's military buildup is the most significant military buildup in Europe since World War II. Plus, world leaders meet in Munich today for a security conference. Russia absent for first time since 1999. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shaboale. Moscow-backed separatist leaders in conflict-hit eastern Ukraine have announced they will evacuate civilians to Russia as fears of a major escalation in fighting grow. The announcement by the self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic and Donetsk People's Republic comes after the rebels and Ukraine's government traded fresh accusations of shelling and other ceasefire violations in the Donbas region. The U.S. and its allies have raised concerns that rising violence in the Donbas region could form part of a Russian pretext to invade Ukraine. Russia, which denies planning to attack, voiced alarm earlier today over an increase in shelling in the region. The DNR is unrecognized by the outside world. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he has seen a deterioration of the situation in eastern Ukraine. Speaking at a news conference in Moscow alongside his Belarusian counterpart, Alexander Lukashenko, Mr. Putin accused Ukraine of a mass violation of human rights and discrimination of the Russian-speaking population in Ukraine. He urged authorities in Kyiv to enter negotiations with separatist leaders. The 69-year-old also told reporters that he remained willing to discuss the crisis in Ukraine with Western leaders, but accused them of ignoring Russia's security concerns and warned that any deal must include a legally binding pledge that NATO will stop its eastward expansion. He also dismissed the prospect of Western sanctions and argued that the United States and its allies will always find a pretext to impose financial penalties on his regime. Well, the United States says Russia now has 190,000 troops built up around Ukraine. The U.S. says it's the most significant military mobilization in Europe since the Second World War. The U.S. ambassador to the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe says America is aware that Russia is intent on creating a pretext to justify an invasion into Ukraine. The VOA's Heather Murdoch is in Kyiv now for more on this. Heather, just give us an idea of the mood in the country in light of recent events and fears that Russia could invade at any time.
Yes, we've been talking to people on the streets of Kyiv today and at memorials for the 2014 uprising that ousted the Russian-backed leader back then. People are going about their lives as normal, but when you talk to them, they say they are quite nervous that all of this portends a soon-to-be-had invasion that could be quite dangerous for their country and requires international backing for them to possibly bear it.
And this week is the anniversary of the 2014 uprising, like you just mentioned. We know you've attended some memorials for victims and spoken to some people. How do people feel about current events in this context, especially with reports of shelling in the Donbas region?
People have been telling us that violence in this area has been going on for a long time, but in recent days and weeks, it's been much, much different. And they are very concerned that this violence, especially violence recently that hit a kindergarten and civilian targets, has them worried that an invasion will come and no one will be safe in the region.
And what are you hearing from the leaders? I mean, the West have been going on and on that an invasion could happen at any time. Well, how are leaders in Ukraine trying to keep people calm?
We've been hearing from Western leaders that that Russia is lying and they are planning to invade. And we've been hearing from the East, from Russia, that they're not planning to invade, that there's still diplomatic options. Leaders here in Ukraine, the what they've been doing is trying to assure the people here that they are as ready as possible and are continuing to get ready and to be prepared if they are invaded.
All right, then, VOA's Heather Murdoch, thank you so much for joining us on the program, and do stay safe.
Thank you.
In the meantime, world leaders are in Munich today for the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. Well, Russia is not in attendance for the first time since 1999. Opening the summit, Wolfgang Ischinger called it the single most important conference during his time as a chairman of the conference. He also offered a warm welcome to politicians of Ukraine, such as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, while expressing regret that the Russian government had declined to join this year's conference.
Many feel helpless in the face of global events, and many don't believe that their political leaders can actually have a grip on the challenges facing us. The danger which this report identifies is that this feeling of helplessness is becoming a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. This leads us to give up, even though we actually have all the tools and resources to address such dramatic challenges as the pandemic, as climate change, or as great power confrontations. We must not allow this to happen to us.
And away from Ukraine, in the UK, millions of people have been told to stay at home as Storm Eunice brings disruption and record winds to the country. High winds have led to power cuts, flight cancellations, hundreds of school closures and blanket travel warnings across the country. One person has been killed in Ireland and at least 3 injured in the UK. The Met Office amber warning remains in place across the Midlands, southern England and Wales. Our London correspondent, Juliana Olayinka, joins us now on the program for more. Juliana, this was the first red warning to be issued for either London or South East England since the system was introduced in 2008. Explain to us just how serious a red weather warning is in the country.
Yeah, good afternoon, Tenny. It's pretty serious. You know, the British do like to talk about their weather, but they've never spoken about a weather potential disaster this strong. In about 32 years, as you said, the Met Office issued a severe red warning yesterday, 2 red warnings for the southeast of England, the southwest and London too. It basically means you must take action now to avoid a threat to your life or to your property. It also means that there are serious disruptions. There could be power outages, and you must take responsibility for your life. And that's what's really been happening. There's lots of pictures being shown on social media about how people have been trying to stay safe. I think the biggest casualty thus far in terms of infrastructure has been London's O2, a really popular arena in southeast London. The roof has been completely torn apart, and the fire brigade service, especially in the capital city, are urging people to be patient. They are receiving tens more of calls than they would in a typical period because there is so much infrastructure damage to cars and to homes.
And how else is London being affected in terms of travel, schools and power so far?
Well, travel has been severely disrupted. One of the reasons why I'm at home today, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan issued a severe warning in the morning asking for millions of people to take heed and to stay at home. Again, we've seen so many pictures of people, risking their lives trying to get a good selfie. But it's pretty serious. We know that flights coming into and out of London Heathrow have been severely disrupted or indeed cancelled. There have been some pretty scary images of pilots having to abort landings because of the severeness of the weather. Again, schools have been closed in London. Most schools are on half-term holidays, but in the southeast, in Devon and Cornwall, many people have been asked to keep their children at home, and businesses have been disrupted. I was talking about London's O2. A popular rap musician, Dave, was supposed to be giving a headline show on Monday. It's very unlikely that that's going to happen. All restaurants and bars at the O2 Arena have been disrupted.
And Juliana, it's the second storm to hit the UK in a week. People are still recovering from the earlier storm. Speak to us about the other areas where warnings have been issued and preparations that were put in place ahead of the storm.
Well, you're right. We were also battered by Storm Dudley in the beginning of the week. I think the Met Office have decided to call these storms by names and titles so people can really take it seriously and start listening to the headlines. So we know that the Prime Minister chaired a COBRA meeting of his most senior ministers to ensure that the army are fully equipped and ready if they need to be deployed on the streets to try and help with the cleanup. The Environment Agency, of course, are always on the ground. But I think really now it's for people to take common sense, move their cars away from trees, stay at home and don't travel if it's not really necessary. And we just hope that the grip of this storm will leave this small island pretty soon.
All right then, Juliana, thanks a lot and do stay safe. To other stories now, Italian and Greek boats have rushed to evacuate 290 people on board a ferry that burst into flames near Corfu in the Ionian Sea earlier today. The Greek Coast Guard says 11 people are still missing and rescuers are trying to reach 2 people trapped on the Euro ferry Olympia. The ferry had left Greece for the Italian port of Brindisi when fire broke out on a car deck. The captain told everyone to leave and the ferry was engulfed in flames. As those to come on the program. The World Health Organization announces Nigeria and 5 other African nations to get mRNA vaccine technology to boost local production. More details in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. A court in India has sentenced 38 people to death for their role in a series of bomb blasts in 2008 in the western state of Gujarat. 57 people were killed and hundreds injured in the bombings, which took place in Ahmedabad, the commercial capital of Gujarat. The court in Ahmedabad also sentenced 11 other convicts to life in prison until death. The accused can challenge their sentences in a higher court. On the 26th of July 2008, around 20 bombs exploded in the space of an hour across residential areas, marketplaces, public transport and hospitals in the area. Several unexploded bombs were also found. As health matters, Malawian health authorities have declared an outbreak of wild polio virus type 1 after a case was detected in the capital. The polio virus paralyzed a 3-year-old girl. Officials say a lab test found the strain to be the same as one circulating in Pakistan. The World Health Organization says this case is the first in Africa in 5 years. The last known case of wild polio in Africa occurred in 2016 in Borno State, Nigeria, and then the continent was declared free of indigenous wild polio in 2020. The World Health Organization's Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, has announced the first 6 countries that will receive the technology needed to produce mRNA vaccines on the African continent. At the EU-AU summit in Brussels, Dr. Tedros says Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa and Tunisia, who all applied, have been selected as recipients. The announcement was made at a ceremony hosted by the European Council, France, South Africa and the World Health Organization. The Global mRNA Technology Transfer Hub was established in 2021 to support manufacturers in low and middle income countries to produce their own vaccines.
More than 80% of the population of Africa is yet to receive a single dose. Much of this inequity has been driven by the fact that globally vaccine production is concentrated in a few mostly high-income countries. One of the most obvious lessons of the pandemic, therefore, is the urgent need to increase local production of vaccines, especially in low and middle-income countries. Today, I'm delighted to announce the first 6 African countries that will receive technology from the hub to produce their own mRNA vaccines: Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tunisia. WHO will work with the companies and the government in each country to develop a roadmap for training and production based on their needs and capacities.
The lack of a market for vaccines produced in Africa is something that should be concerning to all of us. Organizations such as COVAX and Gavi need to commit to buying vaccines from local manufacturers instead of going outside of those hubs that will have been set up to go and buy vaccines for distribution to the African continent again.
This is mRNA technology designed in Africa, led by Africa, and owned by Africa, with the support of Team Europe.
More updates from around the world now. South Korea's daily COVID-19 cases have topped 100,000 for the first time. Plus, Hong Kong ramps up fight against the coronavirus amid record cases. Here's the global update.
South Korea's new COVID-19 cases have topped 100,000 for the first time amid an Omicron outbreak, though deaths have remained relatively low in the highly vaccinated country. Authorities announced today that they will slightly ease a curfew on businesses from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m., but retain other measures such as a 6-person cap on private gatherings, a 7-day quarantine for international arrivals, mask mandates in public spaces, and vaccine passes for a range of businesses. The measures will be in place until at least March the 13th, after the March the 9th presidential election. Hong Kong's coronavirus battle has intensified as authorities identify more than 20,000 hotel rooms for quarantine accommodation after the CITES leader Carrie Lam said citywide testing is being considered in the global financial hub. According to reports, the government plans to test up to 1 million people each day from March. China has said it will help Hong Kong bolster its testing, treatment and quarantine capacity and secure resources from rapid antigen kits and protective gear to fresh vegetables. Meanwhile, Hong Kong parents rushed children as young as 3 years old to vaccination centers this week as the government lowered the age limit for the shots, and deaths of 2 toddlers exacerbated concerns in a city struggling to cope with the COVID-19 surge. Over in Europe, German Health Minister Karl Lauterbach warns that of the new Omicron BA2 variant, which accounts for 15% of cases so far, could put the previous success in the fight against COVID in danger if the virus spreads further. He says Germany has surpassed the peak of the Omicron wave, but if restrictions are eased too quickly, the number of cases will rise again. And in the United States, California has announced to become the first U.S. state to formally switch to an endemic response to the coronavirus pandemic.
And so we have work to do as it relates to turning the proverbial page. And what we're announcing here today is about turning a page, moving from this crisis mentality, moving from a reactive framework to a framework where we are more sentinel in our approach, that we stand firm and confident as we lean into the future. Moving away from a reactive mindset and a crisis mindset to living with this virus. We have all come to understand what was not understood at the beginning of this crisis, that there is no end date, that there is not a moment where we declare victory.
Collective preemptive actions like mask wearing, already lifted this week for vaccinated people indoors, are shutting businesses down to curb the spread of the virus, will no longer be the norm. The disease can be classified as having reached the endemic stage when the impact of the virus becomes manageable as people grow immune to it.
Now, police are making arrests at a protest site in Canada's capital, which has been occupied by anti-vaccine mandate demonstrators for 3 weeks. The operation started early this morning in downtown Ottawa, with police saying some protesters surrendered. It comes days after the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act to crack down on demonstrations. Speaking in Parliament earlier today, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, described the protest as an economic threat.
On Monday, as we entered the third week of illegal blockades and occupations, the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act. We did it to protect families and small businesses, to protect jobs and the economy. We did it because the situation could not be dealt with under any other law in Canada. Mr. Speaker, we did it because that's what responsible leadership requires us to do.
And finally on the program, this next story is for burger lovers. Let's head to Egypt to grab a bite of the local Feshik burgers. A restaurant in the northern city of Mansoura serves the gold leaf sprinkled burger, which is a contemporary twist to Egypt's popular salted fish. Take a look.
Known as a local salted fish dish, usually eaten in family gatherings during Easter, this Egyptian restaurant has given the country's popular physics a makeover. It is now a gold leaf sprinkled burger sandwich. Fisik is a traditional dish of fermented salted millet, a saltwater fish found in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea.
I got the idea because fisik, or salted fish in general, are not presented in the required quality in Egypt. I wanted to develop the way fisik and salted fish are presented in Egypt. So we introduced fisik to Egyptians in a different form and quality. We added 24-karat gold leaf sprinkles to all salted fish products in general, and to fisik in specific order to raise the value of salted fish and fisik in Egypt.
During the holiday of Sham al-Nasim, Egyptians usually eat fisik in a meal with boiled eggs, spring onions and lettuce. The 30-year-old Omar Makram, owner of Fasikanistas restaurant in the Delta city of Mansoura, is making it a year-long tradition with a modern twist.
I have never tried fisik before. My friend recommended this place to me and tried a sandwich. I don't like the smell of fisik, and I can't peel it. But when I came here, I found it as a burger, just like any other burger. It's so good and tastes really delicious.
Like a steak served in a high-end restaurant in Dubai or Istanbul, Makram is adding gold leaf sprinkles to add value to the local dish. The price of a single sandwich ranges between 60 and 120 Egyptian pounds.
In general, we're used to gathering as a family and buying fisik. It's a very delicious meal. We eat it from time to time. But what is strange is that the restaurant serves burgers and are sitting, things that are unusual when eating fisik.
Fisik is believed to date back to ancient Egyptians who stored salted fish to keep them for longer periods, especially during drought. The recipe is said to have been passed on through the generations.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyo Olashabo. Have a lovely weekend.